I want to welcome you this morning. First, I want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, and a peaceful new year. That is right. The secretary's report is posted on the door, and Elaine is not here. So could I just have a motion for somebody to pass as read? Somebody just raise their hand. Right. Elaine is taking notes. Hopefully she's connected. The treasurer's report is Kathy Tepersky. And Kathy, let me just tell the amount. Okay. So at the current time, we have $1,907.93 in our balance, which is really a very good start. Our membership is now, unless I don't have the total from today, but up until today, we had 167 paid members, which is great for the times that we are in. Now on to the other business. The nominating committee for next year's executive board. This will be the last year of our term. So the nominating committee consists of Dot Graziano, Robin Pavia, and Susan Ganjami. They're all here today. So the committee is seeking members who would like to serve on the book club for the next 2-year term. Once the present board has approved the slate from the nominating committee, the members will be notified and will have a chance to vote at February's meeting. Now on to the other information. The used book sale is taking place February 19th. It's a Friday. It'll be the Friday after our meeting. The committee chairs for that are Kathy Rushak and Joan Boger, who worked tirelessly, girls, to get this together. They still need some volunteers. That's correct, Kathy, right? They still need lots of volunteers to help set up and work the sale day. The sale is going to be in different garages along Winding Oaks Way. So we're going to call it a book stroll this year. So hopefully we'll get enough people and enough books. The donated books can be brought here starting the day of the meeting on February 12th and running through the 18th, which is the day before the setup. Right, Kathy? Yes. So they can be brought to the live Oak Room, not the office. The office does not want the books this year, so and I totally understand. So everybody knows what the live Oak Room is, right? And if you could gather your books, and we're going to need lots of them to cover all of our spaces this year. On to the author's lunch, and I have not mentioned this because it was going to be sort of a surprise. It is a mystery author, so we're going to keep it as a mystery for a while. But anyway, her name is Hank Felipe Ryan, and I think some of the gals from the Boston area will know her. She was an investigative reporter for a television station outside of Boston. She also had her own television program for a while, and now she's a mystery writer. She's written lots of different mystery books and different series of books. She's won several Agatha Christie awards and other numerous mystery awards, and I understand she's a wonderful speaker and very entertaining, so it should be, that part of it should be wonderful. It will be virtual, unfortunately. We cannot have, a large group in the dining room still, so there will be 50 people here, up to 50 people here, and then we are going to have lunch on the veranda afterwards, again, 50 people. And it'll be, probably have a lunch choice. We'll get to that later. And everybody will just be responsible for paying for their own lunch. I think now we probably are on to our reason why we're here, our book presentation. So I'm going to have Robin come up and introduce our speaker for the day.
Mary?
Yes?
They want to volunteer the names of Joan and myself.
Oh, yes, so can everybody see the screen? Kathy's name and Joan's name, and is it your cell phone or your email address is on there? And the flyers are all on the table. Everybody sees a flyer. Kathy's really drumming up business here, girls, so save your books. Thank you all.
Good morning. I want to echo Mary's words of New Year. Let's hope it's a healthy and peaceful and pretty much uneventful one. Today we have Kathy Rushak, who is going to present Lizette's list. Kathy married into Stonebridge about 5 years ago when she married Paul. Her son and his family live in Indianapolis, and she adores her 3.5-year-old granddaughter. As for education, she has a BA in art history, a master's degree from a seminary, and a PhD in counseling and psychology. Recently, she received her license in Florida as a psychologist. Kathy worked for 30 years in college counseling centers. So she's here to present Lizette's list.
Thank you. I want to start out thanking Paul, my husband, who's dealt with my obsessiveness on this presentation for the last couple of months. I so enjoyed doing Madonnas of Leningrad being about art that I decided to pick another book that brought in the art component. As an art history major, I was fascinated by how this story, with only 4 painters, showed us the development from late 19th century to 20th century art, showing us the roots of modern art. I also wanted a story of hope and resilience because we are living in a difficult time. This coming of age story, set in a historical time of challenge, provides a picture of a woman growing in adventuresomeness, resilience, and compassion. In the end, a young widow and a shell-shocked veteran find healing even after the wrenching of war. Art is used in various ways in this novel. 1, art gives structure to the plot, including the reason to move and the mystery of finding the lost paintings. 2, the paintings themselves show you a parallel coming-of-age story for art, just as we see a coming-of-age story of Lisette. And 3, art is used as a metaphor for various themes in the book: the horror of war, victory, healing, and growing intimacy. In exploring the 2 coming-of-age stories of Lisette to maturity and 19th to 20th century art, may we find more resilience, hope, and love in our own age of challenge. One insightful reader, Carol Henry, asked me if all the paintings are real. As you will eventually see, 3 are not. Susan Breland is a New York Times best-selling author of 8 books, 4 of which were bestsellers, including Girl in Hyacinth Blue. 1 book has been made into a movie, and her books have been translated into 25 languages. On the first page, we have an example of her descriptive language describing Rosalind. Quote, "Here, the light singed the eye, wrapped itself around the edges, intensified colors, ignited the spine." End quote. I love this book. The descriptions of the art, the artists, the characters, the landscapes are marvelous. The pages ooze with her love of art. Although on the surface, Lizette's list may seem an easy read with an easy plot, I was impressed by its complexity. A friend invited Breland to Provence. With rain deepening the red ochre, rosy and golden ochres of the village, she says, I fell in love. I vowed to come again. Here is Rosalind in the rain, or after the rain, which has been granted the national status of one of the most beautiful villages in France. Breland adds 2 other motivations on her website. One was a fascination with Barry Prime, the American who orchestrated clandestine housing and the escape of Jewish artists and writers from Marseille in Provence during World War II. It is truth, not fiction, that Marc Chagall, who Lisette meets, was one such escaping painter, helped by Miss Fry. Secondly, she writes, The rape of Europe of its art has, as it has come to be called, has disturbed me greatly. That would provide the historic context and the passion to carry forward this new work. I picked 2 reviews that describe her writing style. Breland's love of painters and painting, her meticulous research and pitch-perfect descriptive talents are abundantly evident in her new novel, The Washington Post. And from Kirkus, Breland's passionate writing is as good as a private showing at the Louvre. Lizette's Lift is a historical fiction which starts in 1937. Lisette, a young married woman, loves Paris, but gives it up to move with her husband, Andre, to the south of France to care for his elderly grandfather, Pascal. The grandfather has met Pissarro and Cézanne. As the Nazis are about to move deeper into the south of France, Andre hides his grandfather's art collection so the Nazi will not destroy them. He then heads off to war and never returns. Lisette learns to cope with resilience during the difficult war years. During this time, she meets the incredible artist Chagall. At the end of the war, she chooses to remain in Roussillon to search for the lost paintings and also develops a relationship with Maxime, Andre's and Lizette's best friend. So having seen the plot, let's go to time and place. Most of the action takes place in Roussillon. Here is the village without rain. A village of yellow ochre, coral, rose, and salmon perched atop a mountain and skirted by deep green pine forest. The time spans 1937 to 1947, 49, In reading the book, I was not personally aware that the action took 11 years to transpire. The time span made all of the development more believable to me. Lisette. Here is a picture of the author's muse for the character of Lisette that was found on a wall. The central figure, a young, naive woman who experiences intense disappointment to move to the provinces to a village of 780 people. Context. To understand Lizette's dismay, listen to the stereotypes promulgated at the time. Breland writes in her website, Northerners in general, and specifically Parisians, tall, thin, and fair, were considered rational, cultured, sophisticated, and reserved. The South was the antithesis, short, stout, dark-haired, bronzed, coarse, and prone to explosive passion and impetuousness, as well as buffoonery. Maybe some of you can identify with Lizette's fears of living where you did not want to be. My mother could never accept that Dad had moved her from Minneapolis to the boonies of a small town to work with his father. My city-raised sister-in-law says of my brother, you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. So when I make a social faux pas, please forgive me. You can't take the country out of the girl either. So rather than tell you the story, I want to explore some themes. So 4 themes emerged for me as important. 1, the resilience of human growth. 2, grief as a journey. 3, love and forgiveness. 4, art and its development. So let's look at the first one, resilience. And there are several things about resilience we're going to look at. I believe Lisette showed amazing resilience from which we can learn. We will explore different aspects, starting with finding oneself in a negative situation for which one must cope, taking risks in new behavior, setting purposeful goals, giving to others, and finally, integration. So starting with surviving the negative situation, Lisette was not where she wanted to be in Roussillon, nor are in a place we want to be in a pandemic. Look at all the masks. We can learn from her. Arriving at her new home, Lisette gets the final straw. No toilet? Andre's answer, we'll get a rice chamber pot and toss the contents over the cliff. Or you can use the public toilet in the village. Terrible news. Soon, Andre spent days building in secret to share his love of a new toilet. To celebrate this fabulous new toilet, one with a beautiful view over the valleys and mountains, Andre and Lizette go to town to buy, toilet paper. With this pandemic, we get an idea of how exciting toilet paper can be. To celebrate, they go to a bar for a pastis. They peek in. And though the cafe was full, there was not a single woman. Men only, said Pascal. Women don't go to the cafe. Primitive, Lizette says. The second one, then, is going to taking risks. To move forward, one has to try new behaviors. Though there were many risks that Lizette took, here is one incident. No longer able to handle the silence about what is happening, Lizette courageously goes to the cafe with the radio but no women, and takes 2 women and eventually 8 women. Referring to the men, she says, they'll just have to get used to it. These are not normal times. We will not go back to the way it was in this cafe before the war. Lizette is finding her strength, and these broadcasts create a community of women in times of fear and defeat. Setting goals. The grandfather once went to buy a painting, but it was gone when he got there. Let that be a lesson to you, Lizette. Do the important things first. With that said, Lizette begins Lizette's list of hungers and vows. The list is a working document of life for her by which she matures her life. They are not a New Year's intention made and forgotten, nor are they a bucket list, common things we want to do before we die. Her list is a set of goals by which she sets up her own growth, and she evaluates herself against her list as she goes on in life. Her first item, number 1, love Pascal as a father. Done. 2, go to Paris, find Cézanne's card players. Done. Her last 2 items show significant growth. Number 16, do something good for Rosalind, which she does. And number 17, love more, love again, love broadly, and love without reservation. 4 is giving to others, in which you can see her love acting. Lizette is given a goat, providing her with milk, and she learns to make cheese, to sell, and to gift. She not only gives Andre's boots away to Maurice, whose shoes are held together by twine, she gives the rest of his shoes away to start a collection where widows can bring clothes to be given to villages in need. She cuts her hair off to make soles for the soldiers. She learns to give to others. And in the end, she gives away 3 paintings. Finally, in resilience, we have acceptance and working within the situation. Near the end, after finding the paintings, Lizette speaks. I have expanded, Max. I have 2 loves, my village and Paris. I'm not ready to choose. I may never be ready. She is now at home where she did not want to go. So let's go back to the chart. We're going to look at the second primary theme. So first one was resilience. The second is grief as a journey. We all experience grief when we lose something or someone we love. Early on, the unthinkable came with the notice of Andre's death. Lizette is devastated. Breland does a masterful job describing different aspects of grief. Anger at Andre for leaving and God for not saving him. Sobbing her throat raw and imagining Andre's last moments. Struggling to find sleep and then struggling to get up. Touching his things to get a sense of him and burying her face in his woolen cap to get a smell of him. Some of these aspects of grief will be familiar to you. All were familiar to me. I remember when my son died, I went to his closet smelling his clothes to try to find a piece of him. In later stages of grief, she describes, my grief was not stale. It erupted fresh and toothed every night. A sensation one could call being ambushed by grief. Those moments when one's grief is as strong as it was on the first day. Lizette describes it, quote, sometimes a memory crept into my mind like a sly serpent. Other times, a thought exploded like a grenade, end quote. I was blown away by the sophisticated image Breland gives for integration of grief. In preparing to leave for Paris, Lizette takes apart Andre's wedding trousers, even salvaging the thread in the process. We see how far her grief has come in these words, quote, wearing the fabric of his trousers would make it seem as though he were with me, end quote. No longer immobilized by her emotions, she is now able to internalize his presence and his importance in her life. Internalization is a high level of healing and growth. Lizette heads to Paris, a different woman, ready for new beginnings. We have all been experiencing loss and grief during this pandemic. This is not a normal time. So emotional states have been raw for many of us. We have all lost feelings of safety and security, lost intimacies, and lost freedom. The fact that you are listening today in this room or online means that you are a survivor, that you have found ways to cope. Reading is one of them. And we return to this chart, and this time look at the next primary theme, love and forgiveness. This third theme shows that Lizette forgives the 4 men in her life. She sets a goal of forgiving Andre, and with an addendum of perhaps forgiving Bernard. She said she would know when complete forgiveness had come by the peace it would bring. In this statement, she acknowledges that forgiveness is a journey. Forgiving is not simple, but happens as one goes deeper and deeper, like layers of onions. She starts by forgiving the grandfather who brought her to this place. As she got to know him, listen to him, and value him, she began to love him and forgave him for bringing her to Rosalon. Andre was more difficult. He went off to war and hid the pains without telling her where they were. As she allows herself her grief, as we heard earlier, she is able to express her anger, go step by step, and eventually come to the other side of her anger and grief and arrive at forgiveness. She realized she needed to forgive Maxime for ending the life of her husband in the war when he was so severely wounded. Her response line to the raw, vivid images of Andre's death was, "How could he?" Then Lizette realizes, in that split second, Maxime had begun his soul's dark journey. She says to Maxime, "We don't get punished for acts of mercy, Max. You sacrificed your peace for his. Thank you." What insight What a transformation of going from anger to compassion. Compassion, the key to forgiveness, is also how she forgives Bernard. Bernard, the constable, the antagonistic figure in the book, produces a major challenge for her. He brings her many gifts trying to gain her interest. The chicken, seeds for a garden, silk stockings, sausages. Early on, he seems gracious. Later, he leers, is pretentious, and almost assaults her. At times, she is frightened, but mostly she is angry and continues to reject him. His character creates a necessary tension in the book. But in time, Lizette discovers two things about him that give her compassion. One, he has lost his wife and was seeking companionship. Two, it was he that Andre asked to hang the pictures. Andre trusted him. So to summarize Lizette's development, she came to Roseanne with great resistance, but after 11 years has come to love the community and grieves to leave it. Now a true member of the community, she gives 2 paintings to Roseanne, the paint factory and the ochre quarry, and 1 to Maxine. With resilience, she has grown in wisdom and maturity. She has moved through grief, and finally, she has forgiven and embraced the 4 men in her life. She is free to love and to build a new life with Maxine. So now we come to the last of the primary themes of the book, which will take the rest of the morning. Don't laugh, it's literal. So, the 3 themes: plot, coming of age, and metaphor. The theme relates, I mentioned in the beginning those 3 themes. The first, most obvious, is the plot, which introduces Lizette to the grandfather's stories about art and the lost painting becoming the mystery. The second and third are more complicated. The second usage, the coming of age story, will be described next. And the third usage, that of metaphor, showing themes of the book, will be described later. So let's go with the second. The second usage of art is its own coming of age story from the 19th to the 20th century. Maxine, the voice of the art historian in this novel, describes this development succinctly. I've made a chart to make it easier for you to follow his complex description. The visible reality, expressed through the handling of light and color of impressionism, was Pizarro. Moved into the solid geometric shapes of post-impressionism, Cezanne. To the postmodernism of distortion and cubism, Picasso. And finally, to the postmodernism of the expression of the invisible personal reality of dreams. That's Chagall. You have an important historic collection here, he says. We are going to look at this development in detail. As we begin the second use of art, note that the artists are primarily described by 3 different voices. Pizarro and Cezanne are described primarily by the passionate voice of Pascal, who loved his art because he could see himself in it. In my presentation, I have added my own Anne Breland's art historian voice, especially with Cezanne, to help you to understand the development better. The second voice is Maxine, the art historian, who talks about the complexity and the compassion of Picasso, as well as talking about the meaning of art. Maxine, as you remember, was the friend of Lizette and Andre, who becomes her new love interest. The third voice is Lisette in dialogue with Chagall's. As if using a Socratic method, Freeland uses questions voiced by Lisette to pique our curiosity and help us understand this unique painter better. So, to the beginning. The art story begins with the passion of Pascal, the grandfather. I want you to understand how important they are, so you will care for them. Those painters use the ochres we mine here. Then I went from mining the ochre to selling the pigments to the art supply stores. One day it struck me that the path was the same yellow ochre I had dug out of the mine. Imagine that, the very hue I was selling as pigment, and here it was on a painting. It made me feel important in a way I had never felt before. That salon was important too. I was part of the creative process. Can you understand? Art for Pascal is important because it is part of his story. This painting of Louveciennes is given to him in exchange for 4 frames. My apologies to those of you who speak French. This first painting that Pascal gets is the favorite of Lisette. The left painting, as described above, is the real painting. The one on the right, shown on the cover, shows the painting as Freeland altered it to symbolize the coming-of-age story of Lisette, in which she is going up the road with her goat, not knowing what her future will hold. Here is a picture of Pizarro with his wife. Pascal tells us about Pizarro. He had an amazing capacity to lift himself out of sadness. The first show of the Impressionists failed, and all the Impressionists lost all their investment. You know, Monet was poor all his life. For more frames, Pizarro allows Pascal to pick a painting for himself. This is the second painting which he picked. He chose the Petite Factory. Just think, says Pascal, he let me choose. I chose the factory where I had worked to make the ochre into paint. Pizarro asked what I thought of his paintings from me, an ochre miner. He wanted praise from someone. He called his group, that is the Impressionists, the dear unwanteds. I told him that the yellow ochre path makes me notice the range of ochres in all paintings. They make me think I'm doing something good selling those pigments. And the world you paint is one I know. It's not just beautiful, it's true. To the countryside, the light. This description seemed to please Pizarro. Pizarro told him how 1,500 of his paintings were destroyed by Prussians during the Prussian War. They became pathways to walk on and aprons for the women. He lost 20 years of work, except for 40 canvases, of which these would be 2. The history of Roscian is in this one of the tile roofs of L'Hermitage and Pontoise. Those roofs are stained red-orange from Roscian pigments, and the red ground and the row of bushes of flame, that's Roscian red ochre. That may not mean anything to you now, but if you had lived here all your life and had seen those miners come home filthy and exhausted, it would. This is Pascal's third painting, lost to the Germans in the book, but not to the world. Let me add to the story about Pizarro from Freeland's website before we go on. Pizarro was one of the older men in the group of the Impressionists. He was the glue that kept the group together. and was the only artist to exhibit in all 8 Impressionist exhibits. He chose to paint the common man without edifice or grandeur. All of the Impressionists loved light and color, atmosphere. They put opposing colors next to each other so that the color would vibrate and give energy to the painting. Black was no longer used in the shadows, but contrasting colors. I would add that Pascal was the common man, not a sophisticated Parisian, but an ordinary man who responded to these paintings with his heart and soul. The very paint itself thrilled him. This was his art, and he could see his life in it. What a way to love art. So we go to Cézanne. Pascal also meets Cézanne, and this is a self-portrait of him. Cézanne was from Provence and had the personality of the country. He was known for being brusque and rude. Cézanne struggled and was rejected for many of the art shows in Paris and often doubted himself. He used color and shapes to show us the deep substance of things, not the brief impression of the moment that the Impressionists valued. Substance, not moment. Cézanne also said that a work of art that did not begin in emotion is not art. This painting made Pascal weep because his mother had a compote dish just like the one in the painting. But Cézanne's approach is different. None. What do you think I want to hear? That it is real? That you want to hold it or that it is beautiful? I paint to paint, not to depict. Forget that your mother has a compote dish. See, the compote is an ellipse. The foreground edge looks like the tablecloth is falling off the table at a diagonal. Can you see that? It's contrary to perspective vision, but that gives it character. See the parallel standing brush strokes? Notice how each piece of fruit displays its color in visible shapes, steps. This Cézanne painting represents the 4th painting in the book. However, Breland made up her own Cézanne painting from memories in her past. The book's painting with the one lemon that is in the book may or may not exist. You see, I think I saw it too, but I can't find it anyplace either. Instead, this is an existing Cézanne painting of a compote dish, and I changed the description in my presentation to match this real painting to help you understand Cézanne's style. And I'm going to show you some extra paintings of Cézanne that are not in the book to help you understand Cézanne's art, because he is an important key in the development of art. Maxime tells us Cézanne didn't just see nature, he contemplated the idea of nature. To him, Montagne Sainte-Victoire represented the pristine natural purity of the earth. Seeing only the tip of this mountain, like an iceberg, he imagined its geological root. He wanted to create substance. This painting has to be an early painting of the Vatican mountain. The more he worked on this subject, and he did many paintings of this mountain, the more abstract his work became. Watch for less of a depiction and more of a pattern of geometric shapes done in broader brushstrokes as we continue. In this later painting, you see a big renovation. Cézanne no longer uses atmospheric perspective as was used in the past. Notice the hard line at the top of the mountain, which means the mountain closer to you. He is no longer interested in picturing realities in the past, but substance. He also explored optical phenomenon like binocular vision, in which you might see 2 sides of an object to give it depth. See the house at the bottom. Cézanne had a new way of using space and volume, which leads him to post-impressionism and makes him the father of modern art. The Bilmas Quarry near Roussillon is the 5th painting in Chagall's collection. Cézanne painted the earth structure manipulated by man, yet all in harmony. With the new freedom from atmospheric perspective, Cézanne did a second major renovation by reducing objects to simplify geometric forms and using gradations of color as a means for modeling shapes. Trees become cylinders, foliage a half sphere, roads trapezoids, the bush a cone, and many more complex shapes. The shapes that Cézanne sees are the building blocks or the substance making up the object. Another Turner painting shows further development of geometric forms in his painting. Cézanne also strove to make every stroke distinct to define a plane, making his structure more abstract than any seen by painters before him. His geometric forms in landscapes opened the way for Picasso and others to use hard-edged geometric shapes to depict a figure. His hard-won development of these principles became the basis for Cubism. It was no less than a major turning point in Western history. Near his death, Pascal summarizes, "With Pissarro, I had looked for a story in his paintings, but with Cézanne, there was no story in the panorama of the fruit. You see, apples and oranges were important in themselves." He goes on, "I posed for one of Cézanne's card players. I made myself refuse to imagine which of the card players would win the game. The act of their playing was enough." With Pascal, Breland is giving us something we can't get anywhere else: fresh eyes and a heart view of two important painters. Picasso follows Cézanne in the development of art. Breland introduces Picasso not as part of Pascal's collection, but as the metaphor to introduce the beginning of the war book, beginning of war in the book. Remember I mentioned metaphor? This is Guernica, 1937 by Picasso. This monumental and disturbing work is disconcerting. It is a cubist jumble of anguished bodies in tortured positions and a screaming horse. The whole chaotic scene commemorating the vast town destroyed by German bombers in April. The painting was short-sightedly dismissed by the press as a dream of a madman. Cézanne's experiments with geometric forms have been applied to figures in a more severe way. The Renaissance idea of the beautiful figure is entirely gone. You see shapes reminiscent of figures, all from different perspectives, with the intent to evoke heavy emotion. Maxine tells us of packing up the paintings at the Louvre, of 16,000 geometric forms, of 16,000 contemporary paintings being purged from German museums, 16,000, and 4,000 paintings that were burned by the Reich. A new world is upon them. Breland uses art as a metaphor a second time to express deep horror and tragedy. The Weeping Woman by Picasso depicts the raw grief and horror of a woman of Guernica. All of the woman's features are disordered, deranged with pain in lurid colors. Tears burst out of her eyes like white bullets. This painting is a metaphor for Maxine's compassion for Lisette. Speaking to Lisette, Maxine says, quote, "It made me imagine you the moment you learned of Andre's death," end quote. So Maxine uses a painting while Lisette used words to show compassion each for the other. The last, number 6, of Pascal's paintings to be found was the study of heads. The study of heads supposedly was an early sketch or study for the painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon by Picasso, depicting the prostitutes of Barcelona's street with the same name. The study of the book does not exist, The fifth is the finished painting for which Pascal's painting was meant to be a study. Look at the woman's long, angular noses flattened to the side. There are narrow faces and concave cheeks. They're heavily lined, oversized black eyes. Those distortions all appear in this painting. They were in the study. Why did Picasso make them like that? For expression. He may have thought that sharp angles suggested the sharp experiences of prostitution. Her edges show how such a light hardens the human spirit. Picasso was trying out two steps here. Cubism, which flattens shapes, gives them hard edges, and shows different angles of view all at once. And primitivism, the long concave face suggests African masks. Studies like this one surface, like the one in the book, this is the original, and sell for high prices because they show him experimenting and working out the principles of new techniques. So this painting shows him doing two new techniques. So we have looked at Pissarro, Cézanne, and Picasso, who complete Pascal's collection. Now we will meet Chagall, the painter of invisible reality. Lisette meets Marc and Bella Chagall. This is Marc and Bella in his studio, where she found paintings with bizarre, fantastical images and strong colors. Nothing like she had ever seen. We will see her Socratic dialogue with Chagalls. She saw the fiddler, a green-faced fiddler playing a violin on a snow-covered rooftop, his nose bent outward, one foot in midair dancing. The painter's disregard for the relative sizes of things was humorous. While the painting held her gaze, Lisette said, "Nothing is as it should be." Chagall responds, "Yet everything is as it must be." "But these three little men are no taller than the fiddler's knee." He tipped his head in gentle forbearance. "You're being rational. Throw rationality out the window when you come here." One painting had a haunting quality. A giant man in a black overcoat with a bulging sack slung over his shoulder was suspended in the sky diagonally over a snow-covered village and a large building that resembled a synagogue. Bella instructs, "In our Jewish upbringing, the Yiddish idiom 'goes over the houses' represents a beggar. It means a message from God could come in the form of a beggar." "Is the message good or bad?" asked Lisette. "Oh, good. Oh, so good," said Bella. "What you see as a stiff old beggar is not all there is to see. It's the spiritual force that keeps him aloft despite all gravity. That's what I find." Here is I in the village, in which a man's green profile faces a cow's head almost nose to nose. From the man's eyeball to the cow's eyeball ran a fine thread connecting them. It had to be the thread of love. Love is very important to Chagall. Laid over the cow's jaw was a tiny woman milking a cow her size. And in the background, a peasant with a scythe over his shoulder was walking toward an upside-down woman. Behind them was a row of houses, some also upside down. "Separate moments?" Lisette asks. "But single vision," replies Bella. "Well, why are some things upside down?" Bella answered, "There is a contradiction to every statement. The questioning of belief, and offering the shattering of everything we hold to be certain." So Lisette glimpsed that the upside-down woman and houses represented contradictions of life, and the man in the sky shattered the certainty of gravity. Chagall has said, the most important aspect of a composition can be accentuated by the brightest color or the strongest value contrast. Lizette said, your paintings sing me, monsieur, or maybe I should say, they make me want to sing. Even better, he says. Lizette continues, you look right through reality in order to reveal something strange and wondrous, and if I might say so, childlike. You don't just paint what you see in front of you like other painters. No, Chagall responds, I paint what I see inside me. They are assemblages of inner images that possess me. Here is the painting of Mark and Bella soaring upward on a diagonal, his neck swooping back on his supple body so that they were nose to nose, airborne in the little room. Bella reports, he whispered a song, and I could see the song in his eyes. We flew out the window as easy as could be, dancing through space, hand in hand. I saw it once. He had painted my ecstasy. Life was new after that. Love made visible. The Chagalls left a painting for her. Bella, the rooster in the window. It's a painting of a dark-haired woman looking out an open window while embracing a chicken against her chest. The lines indicating the chicken's beak and the goat's mouth curve upward slightly as though smiling. The woman wore the same expression as the animals. Here in the south of France, a human being and animals were safe. This becomes Lizette's painting, an addition to the collection. Later, Picasso will say, when Matisse dies, Chagall will be the only painter left who understands what color really is. The color in the bridegroom of the Eiffel Tower is remarkable. To summarize Chagall, his paintings are not just haphazard collections. The images operate in isolation, but the unity of their content is determined not by logic or realism, but by the coexistence in Chagall's mind of soul and poetry. Things naturally existing in different space blend together. Time periods overlap, separate events appear as simultaneous as in a dream. Chagall's historic achievement is that he opened up painting to the irrational world, to the imagery of the unconscious, of dreams, of memory. He made fantasy images as important as real images. We return to art as metaphor. Remember those three things: plot, coming of age, metaphor. Metaphor is the third usage of art. We have already seen two of the paintings of Picasso used as metaphors. We have two more art pieces that are used as metaphor to celebrate the healing that has occurred. These last sculptures represent the final resolution of the book. Exploring Paris, Lizette and Maxime come to the Louvre. They climb the staircase to see Nike of Samothrace. Over 20 centuries old, we feel awe at her commanding presence, well over 3 meters high and set on a tall pedestal, demanding that we look up in adoration. I was certain that I felt the wind rifling her gown, says Lizette. Nike is an incredible image of victory, healing, and hope. And from the Louvre, they go to Musée Rodin and see the kiss. Is not their play acting of the figures a declaration of their own budding love? In a summary of art, Maxime gives us a description of great art. Great art, painting, sculpture, and architecture, and I would add literature, gives us something very rich. It allows us to experience times, places, emotions that we might not otherwise encounter. It invites us to ponder some item until its qualities teach us something or enrich us or inspire us. By being absorbed by a piece of art, a person becomes minutely different than he was before, less limited to his previous narrower self. And this equips him to live a better life and to avoid getting swallowed by the world's chaos. This slide shows the 6 paintings in Pascal's collection. Starting across the top.
Yeah, well, 6.
Okay. Paintings 1, 4, and 6 have been changed with Breland's artistic lighting. Although the other paintings exist, real as they are. Painting 3 was fictionally lost to the Germans. Paintings 2 and 5 are given to Rosselin, and number 6 is given to Maxime. That leaves painting 1, 4, and the Chagall to Lisette. So I suspect she will share the Chagall with Maxime. Is the Chagall up?
No.
Each of the, sorry, I went too fast. Can we go back, Ben? Each of the artists in this book teaches us a different way of seeing the world. Pizarro, 1 through 3, as an impressionist, sees the light of the moment and seeks to value each moment. Cézanne, 4 and 5, seeing the deeper structure, seeks to express groundedness. Traditional perspective is no longer important for Cézanne. There are different perspectives to see, and we are limited if we see from only one side, one view. Picasso, which is 6 plus 2 of the metaphor paintings, takes deeper perspectives to a new level and shares the deep emotion of tragedy. And finally, in Chagall, we have Lisette's painting. In Chagall, we find soul, joy, spirituality. Though individual elements seem childlike and primitive, he gives us a language of rejoicing and hope. The invisible becomes important. This picture of ecstasy was here in Duluth at Artist Naples last year. So you have been patient. This has been a lot of material. What do I want to leave you with? Just as Lisette and Art have had a journey of development, you and I are on a journey. At times, there are mountaintops. At times, there are valleys. 2020 has been a valley for most of us. But there is hope. Always hope and growth. May Lisette's journey encourage us to find resilience, forgiveness, and joy in our own journey. And as for the art, Breland found art spoke to her when she was going through lymphoma. Pascal, the grandfather, suggests, take care of each other and let the paintings care for you. Many of us do care for each other. And what a marvelous message about art. Let paintings, let artwork in your home, let the beauty you find around you, let the greens of this beautiful golf course and the sparkling light and blues of the Gulf, let the amazing sunrises and sunsets take care of you. Let the beauty seep into your soul and give you hope. And as Chagall, may each of us have hope and courage to fly, no matter what stage of life we are in. May we find within our own spirituality that our heart can sing, that God is with us and sometimes flies with us through the hills and valleys of this journey. We are all on a journey and we are not alone. Thank you. It's gone pretty long. I don't know if you want to do questions. How are we doing? Can you come to us, Mike, please?
Oh, I just want to stand and say, I feel privileged to have been here to hear you today.
Oh. I'm very sad. I just want to tell you that I feel privileged to hear you today. Thank you. It's very touching. You want to come up here and ask it? This is Robin.
Hi.
You can't see her.
But I exist. Your presentation was fabulous. And I'm wondering, I'm not familiar with this author. This was her first book. Do most of her books use art to tell the story? And I wonder if she chooses the art first and makes a story to convey it, or if she has a plot and fits art into it.
All of her books are about artists. All of the earlier books, the first 7 books, are about one artist and 1 or 2 paintings. This was the only one that had a multiple group of paintings. And the earlier works were the ones for which she attained bestseller list. This one did not become a bestseller, so I was nervous about having you read it. But it provided such a wonderful coming of age story of art. It's hard to pick up, and so that's why I picked this one for the complexity. I don't know which she picks first, the plot of the art. I suspect she goes with the artist or the painting first. But she says she'll only take an artist that she can find has universal themes along with his or her work. Good question. Other questions? Well, thank you again. Thank you so much, Kathy. It was absolutely wonderful, and I give you a hug if I could. I just someday. So, let's see. Really, I was so moved, Kathy. It was a wonderful story and a wonderful art lecture. I don't think I've had one well done. So thank you very, very much. Our next meeting is February 12th, and Barbara Elliott will present The Best We Could Do, an illustrated memoir. And I've been told that it is a graphic novel. This is something we've never heard before either, so I'm very much looking forward to this. So we'll see you all on February 12th, and don't forget the book sale. Start saving your books, bring them up. You can start bringing them at the February 12th meeting. Thank you all, ladies, for coming, and I'll see you all in February. Thank you, girls. Oh, and thank you, Ben, for putting up with us.